but I'm really worried about the negative model that I saw or heard about at least last semester with a couple of history teachers in San Jose who took a very small chunk and misunderstood, I think, the bigger picture. And they said, oh, it's about kids on computers, so here we go, let's do some computer time. And a bunch of kids were watching a video online that they could have very easily watched in their independent learning time or on their own, or could have taken a much smaller period of class time if they had just said, these are the 3 things I want you to know. So anyhow, I wanted to cover the technology thing now because I know that's something that, I don't know, I imagine that's something that is a bug in your ear at times. I kind of want to pause right now, but I kind of don't want to because there's a lot more that I could say, and I wonder if your questions are going to get to that, but I don't know. What do you? I'm pretty good to go with whatever. I'm happy to go for another 5 minutes talking about schedules and calendars, or yeah?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So calendar. Like I said, one of our challenges has been let's make our intersession a really valuable experience for every kid, and so expeditions is just a new word for it. But expeditions themselves are going to be assessed in a way that's different than other things. So content is, sorry, here, you got it or you don't. And so we right now have these guides, these learning maps, in which we say, and math is the one right now, I can show you the other content areas, but we say, this is what it means in terms of the content, this is what we prioritize and care about, where are you? So we use this year the NWA map as our foundation, and built out a math map or guide that's all these content areas or focus areas for math. So it's something like quadratic equations, linear inequalities. Those are little areas on the guide. In there they have resources. They're in a thing called a playlist, so if you hear the playlist terminology, that's what they're talking about. And it's also practice problems, and then there's an assessment of that content. Right now they're not where we want them to be at all, but they are what they are. They're multiple choice tests, and 80% is considered basic competence in that particular focus area. Which would concern me much, much, much more if that were it. If all we cared about was content, then that's very worrying. We have rote memorization of procedures, and we're checking you off because you passed an 80% multiple choice test. But that content feeds into performance tasks, which are still, I would definitely say, variable in some cases. In some cases, they're really good though. So project-based and problem-based learning. We've based a lot of these on what we found from the Smarter Balanced release questions for performance tasks. So those are the richer assessments of cognitive skill. This, by the way, is being assessed, these cognitive skills. They're easy to talk about, but they're being assessed on a single instrument across all subject areas next year. And so this is, like Karen said, problem formulation, interpretation, precision and accuracy, things that go across any subject area, any discipline. We've actually been working with Scale we took their, what they've already produced, and they produced some of this with deeper learning for Hewlett, and we took it and we played it out as a model as much as we can. We would love it. I mean, we're having to create a lot of stuff that we wish someone in the world would create because we think it's the right thing to do. But and I hope they do, we've been talking with Ray and Ruth, and if they end up creating something that they believe in and believe is a better instrument for cognitive skills, we'll absolutely take it. In no way do we want to create wheels that are already out there. That's getting well. So that's how those are assessed across disciplines. Will be a single rubric. Non-cognitive, we have a rubric that we took from the state of Illinois and then put a bunch of materials behind. It basically follows the Goldman. It's like, so we have self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management, decision-making. And so it's based on the Castle framework. Lisa Madoff, actually, who does some of the adolescent development coursework here, recommended Castle. Then we looked out there. Castle has lots of materials. They have no assessment instrument. We looked at all the Duckworth stuff. They have all these Likert scales with 26 different domains. It's like crazy, and I know that's what Kip's looking at. We wanted it to be simpler and more of a continuum. And so we then found Illinois had gotten a bunch of psychologists, and they leveled it so that it was growing on itself as a developmental continuum for social emotional learning, which works pretty well for these like non-cognitive skills, a title that nobody likes but everybody uses. And then I just want to let you know how those things are assessed. So Expeditions are badged, so it's kind of like if you invested yourself in this particular, if whatever it might be. It could be, we have to get VPA credit through these, so it's an art class. If you invested yourself in it and really did as good a job as you could do, you are going to get the little badge for that art class. But it's not graded largely. Those are experiences like an outdoor leadership trip. I think it would be silly for us to try and grade such a thing. But there's valuable experiences nonetheless. In terms of the school calendar, we're not increasing the amount of school days. We're just breaking them up because we have to have an internal team leading expeditions, and they have to do one site at a time. Just for our own money reasons and everything else, we can't have it the way we do now, where we have every single teacher released for the month of January. That could never work. So these then rotate, which has some implications. Not every teacher at SPS is going to be off at the same exact time, which I think has real benefits. It has trade-offs. We can't get everybody in one room, except for the beginning of the year and if we create a in-service day. But we can have them go out to other sites and check out what other people are doing. And especially if our assessments are set up along the same continuum, graded on the same instruments, then they have a real point of collaboration. How do we get our kids successful on these particular assessments that we've all said are the ones we want to drive towards, because they're going to get kids college ready. So anyway, that's what teachers could be doing in this time. It'll look similar to how it does now. Kids, on the other hand, will be with this team of 10 to 15 individuals who will be guiding expeditions, stuff like internships, in the VPA range, also a visual performing arts range for our A to G requirements. College readiness could be looking at schools, career prep, and easy one would be internships, community contribution, easy one would be service learning, just throwing out simple examples. Health and wellness, one could be setting goals related to physical activity and then meeting those. Something we've done really poorly on in the past. So finally, in the school day, and I know core time has been the part that everyone's most interested in, and we can provide very broad strokes, I think, at the moment. Core time starts everything. At the moment, the imagining is that it is English, history, science, and math. That comprises the core. That core time, however, is really about cognitive skill development. So it's not, you would not, I hope, see a history class that is all a lecture on the causes of World War I. That may be very interesting content for some kids. However, you may see a class that's more about interpreting that information. So the conveyance of content is not the central piece of this core time. And it's also a group of teachers sharing a group of kids. Another reason we have a negative model set up in San Jose right now, and we're changing this as we speak, as of today actually, is there's some competing interests when creating this time. I think one is, and from our beginning and to this day, we are entirely set up around heterogeneity, so we do not want to lose that at all. And if you hear almost anybody, I've heard very few people say they believe in personalized learning and heterogeneous classrooms. And yet, I totally believe in personalized learning and in heterogeneous classrooms. I don't mean personalized learning like a teacher sitting with one student at a time. I mean students getting what they need. That's what we said forever. That's why we went to differentiation years ago. And it just hasn't really worked. I mean, we have differentiated as much as we possibly can, and yet some kids are still bored and some kids are still overwhelmed. And so it's still the place we need to go, but our instructional groups need to be heterogeneous. I totally lost track of what I was just saying, but because that one's a really huge issue for me. I think the types of things you should see in this core time is are things like Socratic seminars, things like complex instruction, because if you take the content out of it, if you take the content out, you're able to focus on skills, and every kid needs to develop their skills. So even if one person is writing a research paper and another is writing an essay, and another is giving a presentation, they all need to do research. And so research is a skill you can teach, regardless of the product they're creating, and regardless of the levels of those kids in that group. So it's more than theoretical. I mean, it sounds very theoretical, but it's actually, we've mocked up lesson plans and done them with kids in San Jose, and those have been the most successful lesson plans to this point. And it keeps heterogeneous classrooms, and it keeps kids working on things they need to be working on at the time. So those are some of the things you might see in core time. Personalized learning time is more about the content, and community time is really about a sense of belonging. So having kids belong to the community, to belong as academics who are going to be college bound, which is a big challenge. So, so that's pretty much, I mean, I think that's the broad strokes, and I'm happy to, and Kieran and I are happy to talk more, please.
Where does Spanish fit into this?
Yeah, great question. The reason I'm leaving it out is because different sites make different choices. So, for lots of reasons. And I know some sites will say Spanish is a core subject, and we're going to make sure that it's included there. I know other sites are going to say Spanish is not in our core time, even though it does have, like, these same cognitive skills can be developed in Spanish, but we're going to push that content, treat it more as a content subject, and emphasize those skills in English.
So are you saying that it would not be taught at some of the schools, or?
No, we will definitely have a world language at every site for at least 2 years for every kid.
But that wouldn't fit in the 9 to 2 space?
It's one site may make one decision and another decision. But it's not like anybody's being told one way or the other.
Yeah. So would you be offering AP for people that want to, I mean, you need to have 2 years, but what about the AP courses?
Yeah, I think, the honest answer is I don't know. I think some may very well, may choose to do it. Certain kids for sure will be taking AP, AP Lit and AP Lang in Spanish. I don't know if there will be as many kids as are taking it right now. And I think I know at some sites Spanish will not be the only language offered. Are there other questions?
So I'm curious about the core and the way you're thinking about content, because somehow it seems like content is being detached from these cognitive skills, and that you have the sense that there are these cognitive skills that could be taught across content areas, and all the content is going to come through the personal learning time. So think of our own subject, English. I'm not sure how that works exactly, how you're imagining.
Yeah, okay, so
I mean, what is it? I mean, I can't imagine, I mean, in terms of what we teach in English, if you watch a video on Shakespeare, but that would be particularly valuable.
Right.
So much of the content and the learning how to read critically and analyze literature, first of all, it's a little bit specific to literature, and second of all, I'm not sure how it could be, how kids would get that in the personal learning.
Yeah, so, okay, this is a great question, because I think, so in core time I focus on the cognitive skill things. I think that's the major shift. If you go into most of our classrooms now, you'll see content-based instruction. And English being an kind of like the opposite of that. I mean, very often it is not content instruction.
So what do you mean by content-based instruction? Maybe that's where I'm getting
like direct instruction about, I hate to use this example, like the causes of World War II. We saw, when we started a con pilot last year in San Jose, we would see kids learning, throw out some math terms for me, like,
Quadratic functions.
Quadratic functions. Okay, so they're like learning about quadratic functions online. And then they go into a session with a teacher, and the teacher would just lecture about quadratic functions and then practice the same type of question types that they just practiced in actually a more valid, more feedback-rich environment. And so in that case, all they're doing is, there's no reason actually for that instruction to have happened with a teacher. And so in the core time, there's two things happening. There's that cognitive skill instruction stuff. There's also, they're working on projects. Every kid's working on some performance task. And so what happens in there has got to get them ready to succeed on it. So persuasive speech is a good example in English, I think, because there's a lot of, there is content there. For sure there's content there. Rhetorical devices don't necessarily cut across into a lot of other different, it's a spoken set of content. And so that is something I think you can learn. You can learn of what they are outside of the context of my time with my teacher. But then you have to practice them during the time with your teacher. And so I do think that working on the product, a lot of time working on the product is another part of this core time. I don't know if I'm answering your question, though, Pam.
Not
You're talking about literature, maybe?
No, I'm actually, Rob, you were nodding.
I was going to ask the other question.
you're asking how do you get to the core, in the core time, how do you get to skills without content being a part of it? And then I want to take the other part of it and say, how are you conveying this content, which maybe means knowledge? I'm not sure if you're using it to mainly mean knowledge or
Yeah,
kind of
maybe that's a better
atomized facts or something. How do you convey those without having any of the rest of the skill and activity involved in it? You said that there was a negative example that has been going on where kids have been learning it in a sort of rote way, and that you're going to fix it so that they're not learning it in a sort of rote way. But it sounds to me like if you define this so that content or knowledge or facts or whatever are, you know, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, that assumption is what's leading to the sort of rote feel of it. So it's like this distinction between content on one side and then the skills in which the content is applied that seems to be both, you know, counterproductive to both sides of the division, right? Like knowledge and subject matter or content, what you're calling content without skills is rote, is boring, and then skills without subject matter in it is yeah, I mean that's a kind of central finding, I think, of a lot of the work that informs what goes on at Stanford, is that to learn skills in isolation from the rest of this doesn't make sense. Right. So I mean that's what I see as strange with the distinction you're making between the content and then the skills.
So maybe what'll help then is to like play through something, because I understand, yeah, because this is all theoretical. And so like let's take, this is even a map that we draw all the time. I'm using old language. I'm calling these performance tasks. They've been called for months now understand, apply assessments. And in order to, you have to talk about something. I mean, skills disconnected from content makes no sense. I don't know how you practice basketball if you don't have a hoop or a ball. So like, anyway, these like content we've been calling no-do. I'm referring to them as content at the moment. But I am saying these are things you know and can practice in a pretty isolated way. So the analogy would be more like a dynamic exercise and an isolated exercise. So this then, I'm going to take a speech because I think an English example would be useful, but I'm happy to take a history example or something.
Speeches.
Speeches. All right. So we have a speech. This is where a kid, not exactly where a kid starts. A kid starts actually, this is laid out. Like, I mean, competency-based would not work unless you can say, these are the things that are coming. If that has to be defined first, that is not traditionally what's been defined first. You show up in a class and the teacher does something they may have created the night before or not. It's a standard of that teacher's choosing, largely. So we are collectively having our faculty get the best of these assessments from hither and yon, from classrooms they already have, and from places that they find great assessments. And these are the big assessment types, so we have a speech in this case. Within the speech, there are going to be a lot of different, I'm saying content. I'll call it something else if it works better, because language matters here, I know, but these no-do things that will lead towards being able to accomplish a good speech.
Can you give an example?
Rhetorical devices, knowing like what, just on a basic level, like a speaker, occasion, audience, purpose, subject, tone. Knowing how to present yourself, yeah, that kind of stuff. Which, I'm not saying you can learn it in a totally isolated way, but you can actually learn and practice rhetorical devices without that are disconnected from writing this exact speech. Right? I mean, you totally can. I've had kids do it a million times. So, so they say like imagery, write an example of imagery, is totally disconnected from this speech where they're using imagery to advance to a specific purpose. That would be an example of this. I don't know, just imagery I just threw out because it's on my note. This could be some other rhetorical device. I don't know. Do you get it? What is it? Then the role of the teacher becomes a few things, I think. One is allowing kids to access this information on their own or with others. So in a way in which they are directing their learning. So that goes to these non-cognitive skills here. By the way, none of this is simple. Like, I'm making it sound like there are distinctions, and simplicity is not at all. So, imagery. You have this playlist on a computer about imagery. That means nothing to somebody who is a very poor reader, or doesn't understand how to take notes, or is unable to access the help they need, or doesn't even know they're going to encounter obstacles, or doesn't see how it's connected to anything else. So they start here, and they know the speech is the thing I'm working on. The things they're accessing, like the rhetorical devices in this example in imagery, our instructions about how do you access that stuff and what do you do with it once you've accessed it, how do you organize it. Then it becomes getting these kids together in a place. Sometimes with speech kids, sometimes not with just speech kids. So research is going to be important for these kids. Hopefully kids working on historical essays, I'm saying essays, some assessment in history, they're going to be doing research there. Hopefully in science there's going to be research happening. And so a lesson could be discipline agnostic in a way, but focused on the skill of research. I truly believe that to be true. I think other lessons will be about speeches and how to best develop an argument using a speech. And so that is the role that a teacher largely plays in this core time, is to get kids to be prepared to be successful in this assessment in this case. Yeah.
I guess I kind of have a similar question. So I've taught at a lot of different schools, and I've been an English teacher, so I want to talk English specifically, sorry to everybody else, but I think it applies to everything. So, I mean, I feel like core, like content and skills to me go hand in hand. I do agree that English is very skill-based, but I also feel like, so I see the model you guys have. Why not switch to a block schedule and give teachers collaborative time so that they can plan common assessments? Like I've been at a school where as an English teacher, I've collaborated with the history teacher. We've had a common assessment. I've taught skills and I've done content and I've done really creative stuff with kids, and every single one of them has done really good work. So I guess my question is, why, I'm all for like changing models of schooling, I get it, but why like compartmentalize kids instead of bringing kids together? Like I understand, like one of the things I get is that it's not all computer based, but in English, if kids are reading different books in some way, you're tracking, sorry. Like if I'm having all my kids read a certain book and we're all coming together and we're discussing the book, the kids are learning something from each other. And I think that's one of the common concerns I've heard with my English teachers is like, we're losing that community. So I guess that's the question I have for you guys. Like, what's the point of splitting things up instead of really supporting teachers and giving them more class time to be able to go in depth with some of these things that you guys are wanting to do with kids? And, you know, what's wrong with that model, I guess I'm asking.
Sounds like, yeah, there's two things. The block schedule, and then are you saying the other one would be about, is it about reading?
Yeah, I mean, like kind of this idea of giving kids choices. Like from what I understand, what that would mean is that kids would have a choice about what book to read, and the idea is that you're meeting their different needs. But I would argue that there's a way to teach a book that is challenging and give various supports to kids and make those kids all successful. I've done it. I've seen other teachers do it.
Yeah, you don't have to
So I'm just kind of curious, like, what the rationale is to kind of get rid of the community.
Right.
You know, and kind of with the scheduling. So I guess it is two questions.
Yeah, let me talk block scheduling, that's the easy one.
Okay.
We have block schedules now. I mean, we have 120 minutes that an English and a history teacher can do whatever they want in that time. They could choose, as we did very often in the first 2 years of Summit Prep, to split that up however we wanted. I'd have kids for 2 hours one day, and then the next day the history teacher would. So we already have a system in which time is really flexible at teacher discretion. And this is no different than that. I mean, in no way would that change. Teachers can choose to, and do, I mean, at times across the schools, do 120 minutes, 90 minutes, and 30 minutes. You know, so I think that I agree with you. That shouldn't change. The amount of time should, as much as possible, fit the activity and what's needed with the kids. The second one, reading. No, I think like the model for English, there's two things that I think might change. So I think the first is that this writing across the curriculum thing that kind of, it works at some schools and everybody's talked about it for a long time. Like, Common Core gives us a leg to stand on, and so one of the biggest messages from this past intercession that hopefully your mentees took away is that everybody is a writing and reading teacher, and that writing and English teachers, you guys should be supporting other teachers, because you are the expert on faculty in teaching writing and reading. And so we need to, if anything even remotely like the performance tasks that we've seen come out of Smarter Balance, actually hits the ground. And I don't know. I don't know if it ever will. It almost doesn't matter, but at this moment in time, we can take those sample performance tasks and say, math teachers, are your kids ready for that? Can they write and explain their reasoning in a way that's going to allow them to be successful in that type of task? And do you think that type of task is a good type of task? They will say, yes, it is a good type of task. No, my kids are not ready for it. And oh my gosh, I don't know if they can explain their reasoning that way. I doubt it, because I haven't asked them to very often. So I'm answering this in two parts. Like, one is, across the curriculum, there should be more reading and more writing, and including novels. In history, if you were learning about a certain era, a certain event, if that's part of it anyway, then you compare that with fiction. The other part is English class. Like, a mental model I use anyway in thinking about this is the IB, and how it's not necessarily a free-for-all. Not like, it's not always independent reading for everybody. It would be much more about like style level. Instead of using IB, has like these lists in which it's like, out of these 100 world lit books, you need to pick one and teach it to your kids for this assessment. It would be more about a different type of list, as a Lexile level list, because that goes with Common Core. And so it would be trying to get the appropriate level for kids and give them the skills to access those books. So it's still heterogeneity. I honestly don't know. Like, I think different teachers will do different things, and reading circles, for example, will still exist, I hope.
Right.
But on the other hand, I hope that there are classes that are able to get together around Hamlet. I can't say that on October 15th in 2013 they will, but I think, or no, let's say 16, but I hope in no way would this preclude that from happening.
Can you maybe, and maybe just need a little bit of nuts and bolts, a little bit more about, like, how do you imagine that time between 9 and 2 working? Will students still move between these core subjects? Will this be a more open time? I guess I just need a more practical picture of what, like, how do you imagine that time actually working, and how students move and where teachers move during that time. Can you help me with that?
We've actually tried. We tried to figure that time out a number of times, and we keep coming up with, 4 to 6 different schedules that really could work. I think it also goes back to what Adam was saying about why we don't have handouts, because it makes it feel like it's set in stone. I actually kind of like the idea that there could be 4 to 6 different ways to schedule that 9 to 2 time. Because you should say, 1 week can't differ from the one previous in terms of how you break up the 9 to 2 time. But I think the biggest message that the kids should have from the 9 to 2 time is that this is my cognitive skills time. Now, if they need the personalized learning time, obviously we does schedule in for before beginning of the day and end of the day. To be honest, that's probably not enough time. I think there will need to be some personalized learning time here or there within the core time, but that should be when a teacher can explicitly tell a kid, they're working on a certain math project and saying, oh, you don't really have this proportional reasoning down yet, you really need this. Take this half hour now, let's go back to this. I can point to a playlist and say, we need to revisit this and make sure you master the material. But the core time is when they should be moving from, and it could be, speech will probably cover English and history, so they may be in like a 2-hour block with English and history, focusing on their speech. And they might be able to move, maybe there's an interdisciplinary math and science project they have for the last 2 hours. But, I was talking with Diego Randall about this, usually when we ask a kid, what are you learning? They'll often say, okay, well, in math I'm doing this, and then in history I'm learning this, and in science I'm learning this, and that's all well and good. But wouldn't it be cool if the kid says, well, I'm learning how to construct a Bible argument, and what that looks like in math is this, and what it looks like in English is this. I'm learning the value of precision and accuracy, and in science it looks like this. So it's, well, we don't have we don't have a perfect schedule now from 9 to 2. I'm not sure when we will have that, but the main thing is the message that we're seeing to kids during that time, and that's the development of your cognitive skills during that time.
Could you do the same with the so what
Yeah,
about the PLT time?
Yeah.
What exactly do you envision that looking like? That if it's not kids in front of computer, is it playlists? What's
And are
going
the
on?
teachers there from 7 to 5? Or?
No. Okay, so yeah, that is really, so yes. The PLT is really based on early in the year, the first year of this anyway, that kids are coming in. A good chunk, I would imagine 4 weeks most likely, will be given to orientation. And in that time we're running them through the one thing we didn't draw up here, which is really important, this like self-directed learning cycle thing again and again. So setting goals, becoming self-aware enough to know what their strengths and challenges are. Setting goals, encountering obstacles, trying to find ways to which they can overcome those obstacles, planning for the learning it, showing that they know it, and then reflecting on it. And so some kids are going to have, based on the conversations they set up with their family and our mentors and teachers, they may take advantage of 3 of those hours at school, or 4. I mean, it's all, they can choose up to 4 hours in which there will be some adult there on campus, the same way there is now. One of those hours is for sure. Every single kid needs to be there for that hour. And so it gives them some flexibility. What happens within that time, whether it's an hour or 4 hours, I think actually the 7 to 8 and the 4 to 5 do look different than the 8 to 9 and the 3 to 4. And that's because there'll be a lot of kids here, I think, from 8 to 9, 8 at a school, from 8 to 9 and from 3 to 4, and less so in the fringe hours. So what they're doing is, at some schools, they'll be doing world language. And there'll be a, let me make sure I know this. I actually don't know the staffing models at every site. At almost every site I can think of right now, there'll be someone there who is a world language teacher. That's almost definitely going to be Spanish. And then at some sites, they'll be doing it largely online, with like a program called Middlebury Interactive. And at some sites, they will not be doing it largely online. It'll be like a class. Those are the sites that may put it in the core time anyway. So it's semantic to some extent, and which matters, I know, but and some will do it one way and some another, based on the site's ability to allocate resources and their values. Otherwise, I think this is a time in which they're going to be doing that content. It will not be enough. They'll have to be directed to more content in this core time. And what else am I leaving out? And at that time, too, there is the opportunity to do things like, I'm hoping and trying to get enough money to do physical activity within the school day. And so those, again, would be things they set up in their personalized learning plan as to how they use that time and what time they can take advantage of.
Are students required to go to so many hours per day or 1 hour per day?
They're required to do 1, and then I'm sure some kids will be strongly encouraged to do more, and some kids will opt in to much more, just because they want to be there.
So I have to jump in, sorry Pam, it's been an hour already. Yeah, I know, right? So I think maybe you can ask your question, and then we'll just do one wrap-up question maybe, and know that we'll all be finding you at different sites and asking you questions all the time.
This is the beginning of a conversation.
Yeah.
That's more two-way.
Well, I've already had a chance to ask a question, so is there somebody else who wants to ask a? So I guess it has to do with the quality of the playlists. So, you've been able to bootstrap from Khan Academy for some things, but how are you, it so much rests on the quality of those experiences you can point kids towards. So what are you doing towards building up those resources and ensuring they're high quality and they're helping kids learn the kinds of things that you want them to learn?
Yeah, this is the million-dollar question. The quality of the whole thing is a huge question. So, as much as we can. So we had the second intersession, and into the summer, we've been able to get funding for our teachers and others who apply and meet the criteria to do a few things. One is to create and curate these things, the performance tasks. And then another is to create the playlists that you're talking about. And another is to create these, right here, these smaller, more procedural assessments. And another is actually to create, what's behind this that we haven't even mentioned yet, are these like learning modules. So these are actually the performance tasks, and even that suggests activities on the way, and so we're going to get the best activities the teachers have either already created or creating to lead up to this. So when it comes to these and those playlists, they're super variable right now. They're not all great. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I think, what are we doing? We are learning and iterating at this point. I think I created some of the first playlists we're using in San Jose, having never created a playlist before in terms of like math resources, and so I err on the side of provide too many resources, title them in a way that kids can figure out what they are, and let's see what happens. And it didn't go well. And not surprisingly, right? But like, so kids are saying, there are too many resources, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know what this one's for, I don't know what I'm doing here, I don't know what the whole point of this playlist is. Okay, well what if we provided a sample assessment at the beginning to show them what they need to learn? What if we included in the purpose of the playlist the skills, the content they're supposed to take away from the end of this playlist? So from the focus groups that we have in San Jose, we're learning more and more about what the kids are needing from the playlist that we weren't giving them. But I completely agree with you. These playlists have to be amazing, and they have to be well designed, well thought out. They have to be, they have to be very transparent on what the student's supposed to take away from them. And our teachers have to know it well enough to be able to say to a kid who's missing something, this is the perfect playlist for you, or this is the perfect resource, right?
I mean, is that no? But we absolutely are not aiming for perfection by August. I mean, there's no way we could. It's not feasible at all. And so we're taking stuff from existing resources too. It's not. This is not a total new creation event. It is taking the best what we already have, whether it's in textbooks now, which I think it will be largely in math and some history. English, it may just say playlist, like refer to, and then novel. And so there is, it's not saying that everything happens online either, but it's saying these are the best resources we have for you to access this knowledge. You're totally right. Like it's
one more question. I think a concern that's come up with it is this kind of, and it goes back to the content question, this distinction between content mastery and then this core. And I think that my concern is that I see a much more dynamic relationship between explanation and application, and you don't distinguish the two of them. You don't master content alone. You master content through applying it, and it's a very interactive, iterative experience. And my concern is just hearing that first we're going to master content with some sort of quiz or something and then go and apply it. Or if someone has a question, refer them to a new playlist. It seems to take out, I don't know if there's any playlist, even like the best playlist, I can't imagine being interactive enough that provides explanation to an individual that needs a certain analogy, or needs a certain metaphor, or needs something that another human being in the relationship, the relational element of teaching can provide. That's my concern, for one, about distinguishing PLT time from core teaching time. But my question, the big question is, how fast are you moving into this, and how many kids are going to be experiencing this? And are you guys certain that this is best for your kids right now, starting in August?
Yeah. I mean, what we're doing right now, so we really have an option. Right now we could say, I would love, I guess what, existing schools, they are transitioning in short ways. I mean, it's not like click, we're in Sweden and midnight we all start driving on the left-hand side of the road. It is much more, it's small changes that are moving towards the ultimate goal of trying to get kids ready for college when they get there, and opening up the ability to have more time with them. So, the new schools that are opening fresh are absolutely starting on this model from day one. And so it really is, I mean, we could try and hope that all the things we want will be created, or that we'll have this 100% figured out in the background, and then we can just, boom, pop that system in. But, I mean, there's no way that ever happens. And so it feels very much like the argument against it, against change in this case,